Whether football, basketball, or baseball is your sport of choice, you know the key to winning is a strong roster. You can't find the best candidates by posting your job on just one site. You got to post on all the top job sites. And at ZipRecruiter.com, you can post your job to 100-plus job sites, and you can do it with one click. Then their powerful technology efficiently matches the right people to your position. That's why ZipRecruiter is different. Unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them. In fact, over 80% of jobs posted on ZipRecruiter get a qualified candidate in just 24 hours. You're not juggling emails and not juggling calls to your office. Simply screen, rate, and manage candidates in one place with ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use dashboard. Right now, my listeners can start forming their own winning team on ZipRecruiter, and you can do it for free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/Colin, ZipRecruiter.com/Colin. Try it free today. ZipRecruiter.com/Colin.
This is The Herd. Wherever you may be and however you may be listening, live in Los Angeles. iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio, Channel 83, Sirius XM, no TV today. What a show, though. Sixers head coach Brett Brown, Lakers GM Rob Pelinka, among those stopping by today. Actually sitting in Burbank, which I love to do. Takes me back to my old local radio roots. Phone number 866-987-2570. 866-987-2570. Very good night for a handful of teams. Obviously, the T-Wolves got a star. Sacramento got 3 guys who could play. Lakers had a very good night. One of the things about really, really good teams, and sports is business, is they have defined initially what they are. Don't undersell that. Ever watch the show The Prophet? I watched that after the draft last night. The Prophet. That Marcus Leonis guy, he's pretty sharp. What's the classic mistake that all the failing businesses all have? What are they? What are you trying to do? That's a really big thing. And the Lakers for the last 4 years, what are they? Are they Kobe's team? They hired a defensive coach, Mike Brown, and yet had no elite defensive players. Steve Nash, Kobe, Pau Gasol. Then they bring in veteran Byron Scott and hand him guys, young players he's never liked. He prefers veterans. What were they? This morning, the Lakers are something. And boy, was it apparent during Luke Walton's draft. 4 players. Most had played more than a year of college, i.e. mature. Productive college guys, good locker room guys, and 3 of the 4 can hit a triple. What did the Lakers do over the last couple of days? Nick Young, immature, gone. D'Angelo Russell, immature, gone. I thought the draft pick last night that really defined what the Lakers are trying to be was Josh Hart, not Lonzo. Josh Hart is not a great athlete. He's not super athletic. He's not a great shooter. In fact, the kid from Utah who's 6'9" is a better shooter than Josh Hart, who's a guard. He's a borderline NBA athlete. But he's a world-class kid. He's a willing defender. He will create and help a new culture. I would have preferred, that was my only disappointment for the Lakers, they went after Jordan Bell. Oregon, great athlete, can't shoot. Warriors got him because they can afford to get him. They got a bunch of shooters. But part of last night's draft, to me, the big part, was Josh Hart. Yeah, Lonzo's the better player. He'll change everything. But Josh Hart's what they're trying to do here. Even Brook Lopez shoots threes. Lonzo, not a great shooter, but he's got range, threes. Thomas Bryant, center, can hit a 3. Kid from Utah can hit a 3. They are finally something. So you're going to look now. Lonzo, Ingram, Lopez, Kyle Kuzma, Thomas Bryant. They are something now. For the last 4 or 5 years, I've been very, very critical of the Lakers. Because to me, all this stuff is about building a culture. I say Patriots, you think smart. I say Alabama, you think tough. I say Warriors, you think young threes. If I say San Antonio, international system. Lakers this morning are finally something. And they want Paul George. And here's the really good news. Danny Ainge could easily land Paul George. They've got all sorts of draft picks. Kevin Pritchard's the GM of Indy. He wants really good draft picks and a handful of guys who would start. Boston is the only team in the league that could easily supplant the Pacers with what they need. But they probably won't do it because Danny Ainge, for whatever reasons, and maybe it's as simple as this, he figures in the East he can be patient. Couldn't be in the West, but you can be in the East. So it looks like Paul George, with Boston now probably the only team, unless Houston rolls the dice and gives them multiple starters, it's Boston for Paul Pierce or the Lakers. So this morning, the Lakers are smarter, more mature, deeper, more three shooters, and probably getting Paul George within the year. They're not going to contend for the title. This roster right now is not a playoff roster. Paul George, you battle for a 7 or an 8. Maybe better if Lonzo's as good as I think he'll be, but you probably battle with Paul George for a 7 and an 8 as the players get better and better and better and better, and then eventually you land, who knows? LeBron, who knows? But I'm just happy I live in a city with a team that has a direction. Because I watch that show, The Prophet, and everyone that fails, I always ask the same question. Your product's not bad. He'll buy a candy store. You're like, oh. He's like, oh, Prophet, candy's great here. What are you? Lakers are something. Secondly, boy, Golden State smart. Last night, 29 teams are trying to catch Golden State. Anybody else notice that? Second round, 38th pick, began the night, didn't have it, and Golden State lands a relentless energy ball. Jordan Bell. Jordan, this kid's incredible. He can't shoot a lick. What's the one team in the league that has a surplus of shooters? Golden State. 29 teams added offense last night. Golden State went defense. I mean, that really is. Jordan Bell was the perfect get for Golden State. Okay, they were preparing for the draft up there, no picks. And the Warriors execs had a handful of guys they in the second round would be willing to pay for the rights to get. And once nobody picked him in the first round, Jordan Bell, Oregon, can't shoot, doesn't matter. JaVale McGee and Zaza, they don't have a big guy on contract coming up here. They need a 6'9.5" guy that can give Kawhi Leonard troubles, that can pound the glass, block shots, just play defense, never make a play for him. Golden State's starting to feel a lot like the Patriots. Everybody in the NFL's accumulating draft picks. New England's now giving them away. They pivot quicker. The only thing the Lakers did last night I didn't like, and I understood why they went with Josh Hart. I really did. I got it. But Jordan Bell is just a terrific pickup for them. Everybody's going offense, and they pivot and go get maybe the most energized 6'9" guy in the draft. Now, Bob Myers is the GM, and, it's just one of those things. When you're just a little ahead of everybody, they're going one way, and you're going the other way. And I thought to myself, how many guys could they select in this draft that could get in the rotation? They went out, and I could make an argument. Bob Myers, Warriors GM, went out and got the next Draymond Green. That to me was a really, really nice pickup. Lakers picked a lane. Golden State picked up a really good player. Brett Brown, coach of the Sixers, will join us today. Rob Pelinka, Lakers GM, will join us. We'll bring in Chris Broussard last hour just to give you updates. We're pursuing Jay Wright, coach of Villanova, who coached Josh Hart. I think it's pretty obvious when you watch that draft last night that some teams just don't really know exactly what they're doing. I mean, it'd be very easy for me to come on and blast the Chicago Bulls, and I probably will at some point. I mean, it's almost redundant, like saying Chicago Bulls are dysfunctional. But I was really actually happy. I'll tell you something else that jumped out to me last night, and it's. I almost wonder if it's going to force the commissioner, Adam Silver, to do something much sooner than he wants to do. Adam Silver has talked about something for the last several years. In fact, I'd say 2 years. David Stern talked about it. And I think the NBA is really, really close with one more move by a team of having to change something systematically here that they've been talking about for a decade. I think you know what it is. But the Jimmy Butler move, and I'll get to this right after the break, I think may force a change in the NBA playoffs. That's next. 866-987-2570. One more time, 866-987-2570. Doug Gottlieb, Brett Brown, the Sixers. I really like what Philadelphia is doing. Only bad team in sports I'm captivated by. Rob Pelinka, Lakers GM. Chris Broussard, when shopping for car insurance, consider Geico. 75 years saving people money. If you're serious about saving, that's what they do. Geico.com. The NBA for years and years, because there's been an imbalance between West and East, has considered just scrapping conferences and just ranking playoff teams 1 through 16, record-wise. And there's your playoffs. And I don't think it's a bad idea. I really don't. The NFL's constantly messing around with their rules, and I like it. College football went to a playoff. People like it. You're getting to a point now with Jimmy Butler going from the Eastern Conference to the West last night in Minnesota. The Eastern Conference lost another star. And if Boston doesn't trade for Paul George, he'll go to either Houston or Los Angeles, Western Conference teams. That means Jimmy Butler and Paul George, 2 of the top 5 Eastern Conference players, are now gone to the West. Now think about this. The Eastern Conference, you now have, if Paul George goes west, 3 superstar talents. LeBron, Kyrie, and the Greek Freak. Then you have a handful of 6 or 7 sort of wannabes, close, but they got a hole in their game. John Wall can't shoot. Hassan Whiteside isn't an offensive player. Andre Drummond you can't have near the free throw line last 7 minutes of a game. Isaiah Thomas 5'8". Kemba Walker meh. Porzingis good, but he's averaging 18 a game, and there's injury concerns. You go to the West now, it's Steph, KD, Westbrook, Harden, Kawhi, Chris Paul, Anthony Davis, Jimmy Butler, Gordon Hayward, Damian Lillard, Karl Anthony Towns, Andrew Wiggins, Dirk, Marc Gasol, Boogie Cousins. And maybe you could say, what about Dirk? Dirk's a star in Dallas. Okay, John Wall isn't even a star in D.C. They're 26th in local TV ratings, 23rd in attendance. People in D.C. aren't fascinated with him. I mean, stars, Lonzo Ball right now, today, bigger star in the NBA, absolutely, than John Wall and Porzingis. Like, if LeBron moves west, 1 more year contractually in Cleveland, I mean, the Eastern Conference, it's starting to look like the G League with better arenas. Will the NBA be forced sooner than they probably want to tweak their playoff system? Because the TV partners say, we're not paying you $1.4 billion annually for a Raptors Wizards Eastern Conference Finals. And I've been asking this for years, and nobody's given me an answer, and I don't really know an answer. But the difference, the American League and the National League, it feels like the National League's more interesting, but now the Yankees are good again. That helps. Even when the SEC was dominating college football, it was mostly Alabama. It wasn't like their 2 through 7 were dominating. Ohio State was still, Oklahoma was good, Clemson, Florida State now. Oklahoma could beat teams from the SEC. Yet you're getting to a point now that if Paul George goes west, I'm telling you, and LeBron and Kyrie, the messaging in the last week is they may abandon Cleveland. It is just increasingly an uninteresting conference. And, Indiana and Boston last night, according to Adrian Wojnarowski, were in talks for the Celtics not only to pursue but land Paul George. And they didn't. And I have real questions. Danny Ainge has been reluctant to get Porzingis and Jimmy Butler. Isn't it hard to fathom he would go after Paul George as a 1-year rental? I just have a hard time getting my arms around Danny Ainge, who wouldn't throw a first-round pick at the Knicks for Porzingis and wouldn't land Jimmy Butler, wouldn't even draft Josh Jackson last night because he skipped a workout, to rent Paul George for a year. Danny Ainge likes the draft. He likes the draft. So that means Paul George is either going to Houston, because Daryl Morey got a contract extension. He would overpay for Paul George and do a 1-year rental. But Houston or L.A. are both west. I love the NBA. I find the Eastern Conference outside of Cleveland and sometimes Boston in a big night just really unwatchable. And I like the league. I think Toronto's unwatchable. I think Washington's unwatchable. Milwaukee's not good enough. I'll say this. I think Philadelphia is the team I'm most interested to watch. And they won 20 games last year. But I'm actually really interested to watch the Sixers. Fultz, Embiid, Ben Simmons, that interests me. 2 guys haven't played yet. I'm interested in the Sixers. If that is not a sign of the Eastern Conference issues, the Sixers, I bet you if you could track digital millennials, they'll get more hits this year, the Sixers, than any other Eastern team not named Cleveland. And their 2 stars haven't played yet. Wow. But I don't think Boston's going to land Paul George. He's coming west too. Veteran newsman John Goulet.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
So the deciding factor for the Celtics choosing Jason Tatum in that number 3 spot over Josh Jackson.
I like him as a player, though.
I do, too. But the deciding factor may have actually been a missed workout. Here was Danny Ainge last night.
They canceled a workout on us when we flew out to Sacramento, and they just decided to cancel it as Brad and I and Mike Zarin flew cross country. So there was something that he didn't want to play for the Celtics.
Did that count him out entirely after he canceled the workout?
No.
Well, there was thoughts.
No. Oh, there were thoughts, yeah. I was mad. Flew across country. You kidding me? I had to get up at 4 o'clock and fly back home.
So is that a little petty, or would he have probably taken Tatum anyway and he just wants to get back at Josh Jackson for making him fly for no reason?
Listen, let's just take basketball out of it. If you were a radio general manager and you were looking for a host and you flew cross country and he canceled lunch and you flew back home and he was really talented, but there was another really talented guy out there, would you hire him? I mean, seriously, if I flew cross country and I was in the financial sector to meet a stockbroker and he skipped out on the lunch and there was another guy out there that was 95% of him, I want to draft the guy who wants to be on my team. That's the thing, man. Paul George doesn't want to be a Pacer. I don't want him in town.
They asked Jackson right after he got picked if that might have factored where he got taken, and he said it might have. He even acknowledged it might have been the reason why. So remember when everyone thought how it was ridiculous that the Big Baller brand had the Lonzo shoes for $495?
Yeah.
Well, now there's another version of them. As soon as the Lakers picked him, there's a new version of the shoe in Lakers colors. It's white with gold and yellow. Is available. It's also $495, and these will be the shoes that he'll actually wear on the court. I know you're against Steph Curry's pharmacist shoes. Does the white Lonzo's entice you a little more? Spend $500 on shoes?
My point was, is if Lonzo breaks into the league and he's a star, $495 will not be that outrageous. Again, I'm reading stories regularly now where homes sell for $20 million. Now, when we were kids, a hotel sold for $20 million. So outside of airline tickets, which are about as expensive today as they were 25 years ago because of the internet, more airlines, tennis shoes are going to rise to $475 here in the next 5 years. So if Lonzo's the first guy in, I mean, it's Lonzo, Lakers. I can see people, if he ends up being rookie of the year, you're going to say 450 is high, but it's not outrageous.
What if they get Paul George for the season? So think of all the assist numbers inflating he's going to get from having a superstar like that from day one to play with him. And finally, I can't believe I'm going to say this. You know who actually had an amazing draft last night? The Sacramento Kings.
Yeah, nice.
They didn't do anything stupid, which is usually their thing on draft night. They got De'Aaron Fox, who you loved. They traded back from the 10th pick, got Justin Jackson and Harry Giles. They also got Frank Mason in the second round, which seems like a steal. Like, how shocked are you that the horribly dysfunctional Kings had a good, smart, intelligent night?
Well, they got productive college players like the Lakers did, and I don't know what to make of their second pick, that Carolina guy. He's so awkward. He's like a sinewy 6'9" guy that stayed in college a while. I just don't know what to make. He's a guy I have to see play in the NBA. All right, hold on. Here we go. All right. Veteran newsman John Goulet.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Lie News.
Breaking news. This is via Adam Kaufman, 985 Sports Hub in Boston. Celtics Pacers closer on Paul George. According to sources, the Celtics are in a position to trade for Paul George with a 3-year extension in place. Now, George would lose money. However, on an extend and trade as opposed to raises, he would receive simply becoming a free agent in 2018. Now, the Celtics passed on trading for Butler. They focused on Paul George, who prefers to sign with the Lakers. But it is possible the Celtics could make a trade for him with a commitment in the long term. So we've been waiting for Boston, who's accumulated a dozen good draft picks over the next 3 to 4 years. All right. Let's go to Doug Gottlieb. That's interesting. So now that Doug Gottlieb joining us, host of the Doug Gottlieb Show. So now you hear that. And if you're the Lakers, are you kicking yourself, or do you still like what they did last night?
I still think you're okay if you're the Lakers. I mean, you can't make the mistake that the Knicks made for Carmelo Anthony. You know, where you give up all your resources for a player. I mean, look, Paul George is a good player, but by himself, he doesn't change your franchise. So they need that number 2 pick. They decided that Lonzo Ball was the guy they wanted to be their point guard of the future. You know, they jettisoned D'Angelo Russell. Part of it was a salary cap dump, and got rid of Mozgov. So there's going to be other free agents. There's other players from Los Angeles. If you create a good enough culture, and if you can get LeBron James, you put yourself in position with cap space to get other players. I think the Lakers are okay. They were on a 2-year plan to begin with. Paul George is not going to make them into a championship contender this year. And, you know, the Celtics just have more resources to trade. That's just kind of the way it is. And that's because of the previous management's decision with the Lakers. And I don't think that, you know, that the current regime, Rob Pelinka, can kick himself over a deal that couldn't be made unless he gave up the 2 pick. And he gave up the 2 pick, and what would be the point of LeBron James coming there?
You know, it's interesting. The Lakers went and got Kyle Kuzma. He played a couple years of college. Josh Hart, senior. Thomas Bryant, second year. And Lonzo Ball, who I think is fairly mature considering he was a high school star, a college star, so he understands the big city. It looked like to me the Lakers made a point of getting Nick Young and D'Angelo out and getting not just true freshmen, because it was all freshmen last night. Did you sense there was a little bit of a culture change last night?
Yes. I mean, well, that's what Luke has wanted to commit to is, first, he knows that you need skill. You know, if you look at what they've been able to do at Golden State, you have to have skill. As a shooter, Thomas Bryant, as big as he is a very good face-up jump shooter. You got to have skill to open up the floor, passing, catching, shooting. Secondly, he wants guys that come from winning backgrounds. And I think he values some toughness over maybe pure athleticism. You know, look, there's some risk in what they did that not everybody is sold on the ability to guard anybody or to get a step with Lonzo Ball. But I think you got a pretty good sense of what he wanted to do. He wanted, Kyle Kuzma can really shoot the basketball. So can Thomas Bryant, and he knows that if Brandon Ingram's going to become a star, you got to have space for him to operate, and that's 21st century basketball, and that's Luke's influence on what Rob Pelinka's doing.
10 of the 11 first picks were freshmen.
Yep.
Generally speaking, I'm not in love with freshmen. Could I make the argument that Lonzo Ball, because of his goofy dad, because he's been a star literally since he was a junior in high school, that of all the freshmen, he might be the most ready to play?
I think Tatum is the most ready to play, but I think here's the deal. If not for LeVar, I'm not sure, and, them being from Los Angeles, I'm not sure I don't think they take Lonzo Ball last night. So as much as LeVar can be obnoxious, and we have to figure out, do we cover him? Do we put him on? Is he part of the story? Is he just a parachute parent who wants to, come in on and be, a helicopter parent and just hover over his son? The fact is that LeVar became kind of a thing, right? And we were interested in the thing. And Lonzo's not really interesting on his own as a person. As a player, he is, because of his style of play is different than some of these other guys that try and take the ball and score it every time. But I would make the case to you that LeVar helped create this image and this following that allowed Lonzo to become the guy that the Lakers had to have. The Lakers have to have a reason to go downtown and watch Staples Center. And yes, it's his style of play. Yes, it's that he makes other people better. But as much as it can be obnoxious and steal headlines and take away from other guys, I think LeVar helped create something that got him picked in the second round. Because, look, De'Aaron Fox outplayed him. I know he only scored 4 points against him in the NCAA tournament, but he outplayed him. De'Aaron Fox is a better athlete, a better defender, and has a kind of bigger, brighter personality at this point. But I think Lonzo was the guy that the Lakers at some point talked themselves into. You know what? We got to do it because it's L.A., he's L.A., this all just works.
Celtics may have passed on Josh Jackson because he skipped a workout, and I said before you came on.
Nah.
You don't buy that?
No. They just want to kick the tires. They like Josh Jackson. They want to kick the tires. They want to take Tatum. And Tatum had the most value to the Knicks as well in trying to get that deal done. Right? I'm sure they'll still, part of it is they're probably still going to, like they'll still call the Pacers, they'll still call the Knicks. You still want to deal Porzingis. I don't buy that. The late workout, and you know what I also don't understand is I don't understand these agents. These agents are idiots. Jonathan Isaac's agent didn't want him to work out for the Lakers because he was too much like Brandon Ingram. Like, hey, you know what? If your kid wants to go work out, if he's any good, send him. It's a one-on-one workout. It's more of an interview. And, I don't understand what Josh Jackson's doing. They want you to come work out, get a first-class plane ticket, you get some gear, you go meet some people, shake some hands. So they were taking Tatum regardless. As soon as they made that trade, they liked Tatum's skill. A lot of people were infatuated with him. I don't buy that. Josh Jackson's terrific, but he's too much like all the guys they have.
So it says this, we're hearing stories Paul George Celtics would be close. If you were GM of the Indianapolis Pacers, what would you demand? You're the GM, Doug. What would you demand to get Paul George? What would you want?
Well, I want that Brooklyn Nets pick from next year.
Okay.
That's the first thing because, you got a chance at you got a chance at having the number 1 overall pick, not lottery protected. So first thing is I want that pick. Then I probably want Avery Bradley. He's the best of the of the other guys. He's probably not expendable. You know, they'll try and give me Marcus Smart and Jay Crowder.
Yeah.
I want Avery Bradley. I take Jaylen Brown.
Yeah.
You take Jaylen Brown and Avery Bradley. I mean, you probably ask for Tatum, but you'd settle on Jaylen Brown, who did play some good minutes in the playoffs and does have is a superior athlete. And now you give a chance to two guys that could play and be starters, or at least one starter and one bench player, and then a potential for a number one pick next year. If not, all right, fine. You don't want to give me the number one overall pick or the Nets pick. The Celtics have two other first-round picks. I'll take those two first, and then the two players that you gave me. That would be how I would dig in, and knowing that I could probably take Kevin Love otherwise.
I tell you, the only thing the Lakers did last night that I didn't love, and I understand why they went and got Josh Hart, but Jordan Bell for Oregon.
Yeah.
I mean, I love.
Look, Golden State killed it last night, and with two things they did. One, Jordan Bell, he's not just a great athlete and a great shot blocker. He fits how they play, and he's indefatigable. He never tires. And then, as an undrafted free agent, they signed Chris Broussard, who's his teammate at Oregon, 7-foot, 3-point shooter who can also block shots. You know, he doesn't fit everywhere, but he fits there. I thought they did it's very underrated, great job. Whereas, I'm with you with Josh. Josh Hart, that's what I was talking about with Luke. Like, I've had several people work him out like, hey, I don't know if he's an NBA player, right? Like, he doesn't really have a position. He plays really hard. He can make college 3-point shots, but he's Colin, he's what you call a line hugger, right? Like, he never makes a three from like 5 steps behind the college line. He's right up on. He's okay. He's not a great athlete. He's tougher than a $2 steak now. So I think he was more of a culture guy than anything. But I agree with you. Jordan Bell was there. Jordan Bell should have been had. Semi Ojeleye, I thought they should have gone after. He went early in the second round. Ojeleye is one of those, 6'6", 6'7", kind of sawed-off big guys who can shoot threes, who can score some in the post. I thought they could have used him, coming off the bench, kind of in a little bit of a Draymond Green role. He's not that kind of defender, but he's that kind of intelligence. He originally started his career at Duke. So I thought Golden State did great. I thought Lakers missed a little bit late. I don't know what the hell Orlando's doing. They're just kind of collecting pieces that don't make sense. I don't really understand what Miami's doing, unless Miami thinks they're getting Gordon Hayward, which is the rumor. But like, why are you taking Bam Adebayo when you already have like your best player is Hassan Whiteside, your second best player is Hassan Whiteside, who's Bam Adebayo? Like you're taking a guy who's buried on the bench behind somebody making $100 million. And Fred Hoiberg's got to be kicking himself over not taking a college job because there's no way you win with what Chicago's doing.
Oh God, it's a mess.
I mean, look, and I don't think Jimmy Butler's the end-all, be-all, like last year was his team in Chicago, and they had all kinds of personality issues. But I do think that one makes sense only in that, like, Tom Thibodeau struggled to relate to a young team. Now he brings in a guy who can preach the gospel of Tom Thibodeau in his locker room. And let's be honest, Jimmy Butler's a really good player, but you're not a great team if he's your best player.
That's
if he's your second or third best player, now you got a chance to be really good. And I think the Minnesota Timberwolves got a chance. They were really the story last night. Like, who would have thought we walked into the draft and the Minnesota Timberwolves ended up stealing the show? They became the story.
The Doug Gottlieb show after mine on Fox Sports Radio. Great stuff, buddy.
Also love Portland, dude. Your boy Zach Collins, he's young, and they got the big kid from Purdue, Biggie Swanigan. So you got two power forwards.
Is he any good? Is he any good?
He is good. He can do a little bit of everything. He's lost a bunch of weight. He's not Draymond, but he's good. He can rebound. He can shoot. Can't really defend. And Collins has a chance to be a starter and a really good player.
All right, Duggar.
See you, brother.
See you. Yeah, that was the one thing. But I understand. I can see what the Lakers are doing. Like, I'll give you a pass. If even I don't love the player you choose, if you're trying to be something. Like, I feel like for the first time in like 4 years, the Lakers are something. Oh, okay, I get what they're doing. Collecting threes, guys that are long. They're setting up a team that Lonzo Ball can pass to. Let's get a guard, a classic, distribute first, long 2017 guard, and surround him with longs. Ingram, Thomas Bryant pickup. 3 shooters. By the way, Brook Lopez came from Brooklyn. He shoots 5 a game. Surround Lonzo, guys that run the floor well and can shoot. Josh Hart's a really good kid, but I thought that one was, all right, let's just get a culture kid. Let's bring him in here. He's a little like Jordan Clarkson. Is he a 2? He can play him at 1. Lonzo's a kid. Josh is 22. Maybe he backs up Lonzo Ball for 12 minutes a night. I'm not sure if I buy this Paul George Boston story. It just doesn't. I don't know if I buy it. The Celtics and Pacers continue to discuss a Paul George trade. It's reportedly contingent on signing Gordon Hayward in free agency. According to the sources, Paul George, who said he wants to be a Laker, would go to Boston and make less money and sign a 3-year extension. He'd go there and sign an extension. Well, he doesn't want to play in Boston. If you love L.A., which Paul George does, it's the furthest city from L.A. in America, and it couldn't be a more different city. It's cold. It's not diverse. It's parochial. It's the opposite of L.A. Now, Boston's a great organization. People are angry in Boston. They wake up fighting and yelling at walls. L.A. is just chill. The weather, and it's a winter league. The NBA is an October through April league. I mean, L.A. is diverse. It's not parochial. It's chill. It's perfect weather. It is the opposite of Boston. I mean, there are cities that are not the opposite of L.A. If you love L.A., I could get you sort of liking Phoenix or liking Miami. There are similarities in the food diversity, the weather, the beaches. Boston's the opposite of Los Angeles. Everybody's angry. Everybody. And Paul George is like, I want to live in L.A. And I can make more money in L.A. Now, I may have to rebuild in L.A., but it's L.A. He'd agree to that. I don't know. It doesn't. And secondly, Danny Ainge would probably been able to give less to get Jimmy Butler and less to get Porzingis. I got to imagine, I understand Paul George, Kevin Pritchard, the Pacers GM. If I was Kevin Pritchard and you gave me Jason Tatum from Duke and the number 1 pick next year, and I don't know if Danny would give that up, but if Jason Tatum, you're like a 6'9" guy who can score, he won't be Paul George initially, but then I get the number 1. I can sell that to my fans. I can say, we got the number 1 pick in the draft next year. Michael Porter's going to be a star. And I got Jason Tatum, who I think is going to get a star for giving up a star that doesn't want to be here. You could sell that to Pacer fans if Danny would do that. So Danny's passed all these opportunities up, and he would do it on a 1-year player because I don't believe Paul George would sign this extension. I don't know. I don't know who Adam Kaufman is. Also, some of this stuff that's out there, how do I know Kevin Pritchard's not putting it out there to force the Lakers to give up more? There were 3 or 4 rumors in the last 3 days about San Antonio doing this. I didn't buy any of them. Sometimes Kevin Pritchard has been around this league for a long time. He played, he coached, he's a general manager. He knows everybody. He can throw things out there to force the Lakers to overpay for Pritchard. I think Kevin Pritchard is sitting there thinking, every week I have Paul George, I have less leverage. And I got an owner, Herb Simon, who's not happy with me. This doesn't make a ton of sense. Also, next week, July 1st, Gordon Hayward has to make a decision. Why would you rush this on Paul George now? Just wait and see what Gordon Hayward does. If Gordon Hayward decides to go to Boston, you don't have to give up anything. You just get him. And that may change the Paul George situation. Then I have Jason Tatum, a big who can shoot. Gordon Hayward's a big who can shoot. I don't need Paul George. So this doesn't make sense to me. Laker fans are probably freaking out. I mean, maybe I'm totally wrong on this, but in 1 week, Gordon Hayward of the Jazz has to make a decision. I don't know why you'd rush that decision, unless Gordon Hayward's already told you, I'm coming. I think you just wait a week. Apparently, Gordon Hayward's redoing his house in Salt Lake. Now, sometimes people redo a house to sell it. Sometimes they do it because they just want to keep it and have a nicer house. But Adam Kaufman at the Sports Hub in Boston is reporting that Paul George Celtics could happen. I got to see it to believe it. Sixers coach Brett Brown, Laker GM Rob Pelinka. Our phone number is 866-987-2570. 866-987-2570. The Herd. This is The Herd. Wherever you may be and however you may be listening, live in Los Angeles, iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio, FS1. Not today, but we're back next week. And when I first started here at FS1, I knew for the first couple of years I get knocked off a lot for NASCAR and for soccer. But NASCAR then goes away to NBC here pretty quick in a week or two. And we didn't renew our soccer contract, that European stuff. So we start in a week or two. And we're back on TV, and you'll have to just deal with us because we'll be on it for the next few years, virtually every day. Knew that when I was coming over, but figured drive up my digital, drive up Facebook, drive up Sirius XM, drive up the podcast numbers. It's done that. So it's been an amazing couple-of-year ride here. And today's a Friday, so I'm doing the show from Burbank. So I'll take a few calls if you want. 866-987-2570, 866-987-2570 when I'm in the TV studio. Just frankly don't take a lot of calls, the production and stuff, we don't. Brett Brown, Sixer head coach, joining us this hour. Rob Pelinka, Laker GM, joining us. Chris Broussard, too. It is, I had so much fun watching that thing last night. I came home, my wife doesn't feel real good. I'm like, no problem. I'll be in here with the cats and the dog for 4 hours. Really had a good time watching it. I thought, obviously, Minnesota did really, really well. I thought the Lakers did really, really well. I thought Sacramento did really, really well. I'm not going to say a kid's going to bust. I just don't know if Malik Monk for Charlotte. I just don't see him. I kind of see him as a one-trick pony and not a playmaker. I don't see Malik Monk, Charlotte doing much with their pick. I thought Sacramento, Portland. I like Zach Collins. I think he's a year away. Should have stayed at Gonzaga. He's a nice player. People upgraded. I mean, obviously now what you're getting is everybody's drafting freshmen. Because the belief, and this has always been the belief, in music and entertainment, dance, you can kind of spot talent early. And if you have to stay in college for 3 or 4 years, chances are these days you're not great. I mean, Josh Hart's the least talented person they drafted last night. Lonzo's the youngest. He's the most talented. Josh Hart's the least talented. He's the oldest. If you're really, really gifted now, generally, you don't stay in college 3 or 4 years anymore. That's not a knock on Josh Hart. I think he's a great kid. He'll fit the culture. He'll help create the culture. I thought the clear number one winner last night, that was Minnesota. They got a star, and they have him for 2 years minimum, and they gave up a bunch of question marks. Chris Dunn. Zach LaVine, to me, has never worked for me. He's somebody Slam Magazine falls in love with. He is, he can jump, coming off surgery, can shoot a few threes. I don't think he has a high basketball IQ. Lowry Markkanen I like, but he's a kid. And Minnesota got a 23-point-a-game star to go with 2 young stars. And I think that's a really cool thing. Chicago screwed this whole thing up, though, a year ago. They brought in a toxic Rondo with an old, expensive D-Wade. They're very similar to the Bears. I mean, no city in America has the dichotomy of Chicago. The Cubs and the Blackhawks, brilliantly run, built through the draft. And the Bears and the Bulls overpay, reach for picks, and have no real identity. And there's certain cities in this country, like Boston, has got 4 well-run teams. Celtics, Red Sox, Bruins, Patriots. San Francisco's got a lot of well-run teams. The Sharks, the Raiders, the Warriors, Giants, Stanford football smart. Chicago, 49% of the Bulls' cap space. Now think about this. This is a mess. 49% of their cap space is tied up in Rondo, D-Wade, and Robin Lopez. That sucks. That's terrible. So, it's just one of those. I mean, the Bulls, Butler was a certified franchise guy, 3 straight all-star teams, big impact player. He had a very, very, very nice contract, a very reasonable contract, and Chicago's goofy management just didn't treat him like a star. And they lowballed him on a rookie extension, and he was in trade talks for the last year and a half, and Hoiberg and he didn't get along. If you get a star, treat him like a star. And Chicago's front office, apparently has enormous egos because they had Jimmy Butler, and he's a star, and they didn't treat him like a star. And they lowballed him, and they put out trade talks. This is all about the front office. Chicago's front office, led by Gar Forman, there are just too many egos. Michael Jordan dealt with a lot of this. When you get a star, treat him like one. Because there's not many guys in this game that move the needle. You got to, I know, God, he's 18, 19. Jimmy Butler's been in this league a while. He's a franchise guy. You don't put him in trade rumors. You don't lowball him on stuff. You do whatever you got to do to make him feel like, hey, you're our guy. Even if you secretly think he should be your second best player, you treat him like your first best player. You treat him like your first best player. Carson in Boston, you're in the herd, and you go ahead.
Hey, Colin, I like our draft pick with Jason Tatum with the Celtics.
Yeah.
Do you think if we add Gordon Hayward, do you think that would get us at least conversation with Cleveland, or do you think that's a wide margin?
Well, I thought Porzingis and Gordon Hayward more than Jason Tatum and Gordon Hayward. I think and I said this last night on Twitter, I think Jason Tatum could be better than Markelle Fultz. I watch a lot of Duke basketball. I think he's a really good player. Again,
he can score.
He's a 6'9" guy. He's very versatile. He can drive, puts the ball on the deck. I like him a lot. I thought that was a great pick by Boston. I think Gordon Hayward's, you can write it down, 24, 5, and 5.5 every night. Jason Tatum, Gordon Hayward makes you you have separated from Toronto, Washington, and Milwaukee. You've separated. You're probably not yet going to beat Boston, but you're darn close. And Carson, LeBron may not be in Cleveland if they don't land Paul George, and I don't think they will. Jonathan, you're in Los Angeles. You're in the herd. Our phone number is 866-987-2570. Jonathan, thanks for your patience. Go ahead.
Good morning, Colin, and it's perfect that you're doing your show this morning from the local L.A. affiliate.
Yeah.
Because with Cody Bellinger, Corey Seager,
I know.
heck, even Sean McVay with the Rams, now with the draft of Lonzo Ball, L.A. is swimming with young stars, and it feels good. It's what this town is built on.
Sam Darnold, it's actually, what's really funny is USC may have a better quarterback than the Rams. And the Dodgers, I just went to a Dodger game a week and a half ago. I'll say this about the Dodgers. I don't talk a lot of regular season baseball. Forget pitching. Their pitching's okay. Kershaw's great. Their position players are outstanding. Dodger fans are really tough on their management here. Like Frank McCourt deserved their scorn. I think Friedman knows what he's doing. I think the Dodgers really know what they're doing. They have got a surplus of good young players. Lonzo Ball to me, and I said this from the very beginning, go ahead and rip LeVar Ball. If I could get my 3 sons, all scholarships to UCLA, I can't qualify him as a bad dad. Sorry, can't. He may parent differently than the way I parent, but that's not a bad dad. Here's what I would say about LeVar Ball. He's in his kid's life. I'm divorced. I don't live with my son, so I always try to make a point to be in my son's life. I fly every weekend, or he flies here. And he's camping this week, comes with me, stays a week. I got to be in my kid's life. LeVar Ball's in his kid's life. Now, sometimes he maybe is too much in his business, but I would take that over the opposite. And, Lonzo said it last night. He goes, I ball, dad talks. I play basketball, dad talks. I think, the Paul George thing, I'll just tell you, there's a story out that Paul George Celtics, I don't buy it. I'm going to tell you right now. I could get burned on this. I don't buy it. If you want to live in L.A., and I've lived in 7 different states, I just left that area. It's the opposite of here. It is culturally the opposite, ethnically the opposite, geographically the opposite, weather's opposite, attitude's opposite. If you want to be in L.A., I have a hard time believing you would sign an extension with Boston for less than you could make with the Lakers. That doesn't make sense to me. I would not be surprised if longtime NBA employee Kevin Pritchard played, coached, GM'd, didn't give that to somebody to see if the Lakers bite. That's what it feels like to me. Now, I could be burned in 5 minutes. I could get totally burned on this. But I don't buy that. I think Kevin Pritchard knows, oh, crap, I am losing. Let me tell you something. In 1 week, If Gordon Hayward picks Boston, they don't need Paul George. They'll have Gordon Hayward, Jason Tatum, Isaiah Thomas. In the East, you've got scores. You've separated from Washington. You're in the Eastern Conference Finals. Kenny in L.A., you're in the herd. Fire away.
Hey, Colin, I'm so happy to have you in L.A. It was great when you were leaving your former employer. I sent you some hummus to your hotel room, and so happy to be talking to you today.
Thanks, Kenny.
Yeah, it's great. Great show. Great job so far. I think that I would rather not get Paul George. I'd rather get a different star, and I don't want to be just a Pacers 6 seed and lose to the Warriors in 4 or 5. I don't want that disgrace to go on. I'd prefer that you get 1 or 2 different stars. We already got our star in Lonzo last night. We got to wait and see who comes at the trade deadline, perhaps. I'd like someone to, highlight what Lonzo Ball can do. I don't really like Paul George 24-6. I don't see him being a great star that can ascend in Los Angeles. I look forward to one day when the Dodgers are back on television. It's been living in Los Angeles the last 5 years. I'm no longer a Dodger fan. They've done major, major damage to their brand by not being able to resolve their television issue. So I don't really think it's worth spending any national airtime ever talking about them because they're basically a sub-regional team. They don't even have the control of the region. People ignore them when they don't watch them. At least I'm speaking for myself, and I think if you looked at the ratings, you would agree overall. I really love what you do, Colin, and excited and hope to talk to you in the future. Shalom.
All right. Thank you, Kenny. Appreciate that. Let's slow down on banging on Paul George. I do like Paul George. Okay, Paul George never really had a great point, and Roy Hibbert couldn't score. He had to carry the load there. He is a 6'9" guy that can defend and shoot and hit threes. I like Paul George. If he goes to Boston, I'd be bummed out. I like Paul George. He's a better shooter than Jimmy Butler. And let me just caution you. Here's my concern. They don't get Paul George, and Rob Pelinka and Magic convince themselves to get Westbrook. For the love of God, don't get Russell Westbrook. Don't get Russell Westbrook. He can't hit threes. You're not beating Golden State. You're not going to beat Minnesota with a guy taking the ball out of Lonzo Ball's hands. Like this team, this point forward, it is clearly designed. Rob and Magic, Lonzo, up the floor, guys with length who can shoot. Paul George can shoot. Brandon Ingram can shoot. That's what this team's going to be. So I like Paul George. I'm not going to be one of these, he goes to Boston, he stinks. No, he doesn't stink. He does not stink. Paul George does not stink. He is a perfect fit for the Lakers. And by the way, Kevin Pritchard, Pacer GM, knows that. That's why I think he's feeding a Boston station to get everybody freaked out in L.A. and overspend on him. At this point, what would I give Kevin Pritchard to get Paul George? Frankly, they need Jordan Clarkson and Julius Randle off the books. And, maybe I'd give him one of the kids I drafted last night. Now, obviously, Boston could give more, but Boston's been reluctant to give less than they may be offering now to get Porzingis. But don't poo-poo Paul George. He can play. And he would be tremendous. He runs the court well. He's got length. I mean, he's the kind of guy that can go and guard Kevin Durant. I mean, that's what he can do. And that's a thing. 866-987-2570. 866-987-2570. Brett Brown, Sixer head coach. Rob Pelinka, Lakers GM, not far away. 866-987-2570. Here's one thing I can tell you, Laker fans. Julius Randle's not going to be here long. First of all, in 1 year he gets really expensive, and he can't hit threes. So if you look at the Lakers' picks, it's pretty obvious. Lonzo Ball's going to move it up the floor, hit the perimeter, hit threes, long guys, Brandon Ingram, Kuzma kid from Utah, Brook Lopez. They want their centers to shoot threes. Julius Randle is going to be gone. If they get Paul George before the end of the year, he's the one I know Magic and Rob Pelinka would probably move. Takes more than a roof to make sure your home is covered. Farmers.com. 89 years. Knowledge, experience. They know what's important to you and what you want protected. The other thing I think is a sort of a ruse out there. I don't buy this Boston rumor that Paul George is going to sign with the Celtics and an extension. I believe the Lakers sign him. They could have bird rights and give him an extra year. And I don't think he wants to live in Boston. I think basically he lived in Boston. It's called Indianapolis with worse chowder. That's it. Indy is Boston. Not quite as angry. They actually have Midwestern manners. Same food. They put the crackers on the outside of the chowder, not in. He wants to be in L.A. He wants to live in L.A. He wants the weather. He likes the city. He likes the people. Indy and Boston are the opposite of L.A. I don't buy this. He would have to agree to that extension. I don't buy it. The other thing I don't buy are all these San Antonio rumors. I think Chris Paul's using the Spurs. I think they have a bad contract with LaMarcus Aldridge. Right now, San Antonio does. They overspent for a guy who's not worth the money, and frankly, he doesn't like San Antonio. Pop is too rigid. He doesn't like him. And Patty Mills and Tony Parker, they're now below average at guard. Duncan's gone. Ginobili, Parker, old. Danny Green, limited. Kawhi's really good, but I'm not convinced that Kawhi Leonard is a grab you by the throat, LeBron carry you to a titles guy. I'm not. He's almost got Klay Thompson's personality. I think Chris Paul is using the Spurs. He loves L.A. His family's here. His kids in good schools. He's not giving up $40 million. He's got leverage with the Clippers, and they allow him to play the way he wants to play. And San Antonio now is a little trapped because they're too good to get great draft picks. So I'll say it again, one title in 10 years, the further Popovich got from Tim Duncan's prime, the more beatable he became. And they got one star, Kawhi Leonard. And he's got a Klay Thompson personality, not a LeBron personality, not a Kobe personality, not an MJ personality. He is reticent, quiet, in the backdrop. And in big games has been hit and miss. Been very hit and miss. So I could argue he's closer to Andrew Wiggins than LeBron James. And Andrew Wiggins is really good, but there's no dog in him. He should be your second or third best player. Like I think Minnesota this morning, your best player is Jimmy Butler. Your second player is Karl Anthony Towns. Your third best player is Andrew Wiggins. If Andrew's personality is not Kobe, he's the opposite of Kobe. Canadian, nice kid, very willing to be in the background. Jimmy Butler to win a title should be your second best player. On this team, he's the first now. Karl Anthony Towns is getting really good really quick. Butler could be the second best player on this team to Karl Anthony Towns. Wiggins third. That feels like you can vie for the Western Conference Championship. I think Minnesota is going to be really interesting. And they didn't give up much to get him. I mean, Chris Dunn can't shoot. I like him. Good kid, can't shoot. And I've never been into Zach LaVine. I know a lot of people like him. I would never trust him with a basketball. 2 minutes left, big playoff series. He'd jack up a terrible shot. So I think a lot of these San Antonio rumors are a bunch of nothing. I just think it's a lot of talk. Because I think they know they're in trouble. I think if they don't get Chris Paul, I mean, it's not a hot free agent destination. They had to overpay for LaMarcus Aldridge. Even these great college football programs ebb and flow. Kentucky basketball wasn't good 8 years ago. Alabama football wasn't great 12 years ago. USC once finished last, and this is college that's built for dynasties. You do realize when Belichick leaves, New England's not New England. It doesn't last forever. Further they get away from Tim Duncan, fewer titles you get. Ask the Laker fans. Shaq Kobe, Shaq Gasol, it goes down fast. Veteran newsman John Goulet.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
So one NFL story that felt a little bit like a news dump yesterday was actually two with the same team. So the Chiefs announced that they had an extension for Andy Reid. Yeah. Which makes sense. He's a great coach. About a half hour later, it came out that they fired their GM, John Dorsey. I guess they told him they weren't going to renew his contract after this season.
Very weird.
And after they talked, they just decided with only 1 year left, no reason to keep him around.
Yeah.
is, considering how good their roster is, how surprising. Like, is there something behind this we don't know?
Maybe something in the front office. Listen, this was ownership saying we're choosing Andy over you.
But who knew that was a choice? They've been so good. I mean, they got to the AFC Championship game last year, right? Why did you have to choose?
Well, listen, you're talking alpha males. I think ownership said, listen, we don't want to lose Andy. If we have to choose here, we're not losing Andy Reid. And I would have made the same choice. I've told you before, I think Andy Reid's the second best coach in football. And I'm talking Nick Saban, Urban Meyer. Bill Belichick's the best coach in American football. I think Andy Reid's second. Some clock management issues, but overall, he does two things really well. Develops players and finds them. And he's got a lot of Pete Carroll. Although, Pete is a little higher profile. But I think if it came down to who you're going to keep, you're going to keep Andy.
I mean, the only thing really holding them back is just Alex Smith a little bit, right?
That's right. No question.
So, Lonzo Ball has only been a Laker now for about 18 hours, and already his dad is predicting some early team success.
Lonzo Ball is going to take the Lakers to the playoffs his first year. Come see me when he does. I have another hat on to say I told you so.
That was him with ESPN's Jeff Goodman last night. Okay, is this forgiven just because you're an excited dad? Or is this something the Lakers are going to have to regularly deal with?
Yeah, probably the latter.
I mean, I give him a pass last night, for sure. But, I mean, he's been a Laker for 5 minutes, and they're already predicting playoffs when they're still one of the worst teams in the league.
I've just come to realize he's a promoter, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah. And finally, speaking of bad teams, I mentioned earlier how we were both kind of surprised that the Kings didn't screw up a draft and how they really did a nice job of being smart. That may have been because they just didn't have the opportunity to screw it up. Here is Vlade Divac speaking with NBC Sports California last night.
Describe the scene when you knew when Boston announced Adam called Tatum's name and then it was going to be Jackson or Fox. What was it like in the war room up there?
Screaming. It was a guy that we all loved, and in some way he would, if we had the number one pick, he would be our guy. Darren is our future, and I just can say how much excitement in Sacramento and in our office is that he was available to Fox.
He is a good player. I like him a lot.
I agree, but you would have taken him number one. So if they had a higher pick, they would have done something stupid. They would have taken him number one overall. They just didn't have the chance.
Fair enough. Veteran newsman John Goulet.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Lie News.
866-987-2570 is our phone number. Chris in the Bay Area. What up, Chris? Thanks for calling the show on a Friday.
Hey, how's it going, Colin?
Good, bud.
So I just have a question, and I listen to you every day. I'm a sports junkie. And if you look back into the Warriors' past, the two teams that gave them the most trouble were the Utah Jazz and the Memphis Grizzlies because of their size. Why is nobody focusing on that?
Well, I think the problem, size is great, but at some point, the speed in which they get up and down the court, bigs generally don't run well. That's why Tristan Thompson and Kevin Love were just a complete liability, and why I picked Cleveland to beat them in 7, and after the first game, I'm like, no, the matchup's not good. They just can't get back on defense. Size is great. I mean, it'd be great to have Andre Drummond, but he can't hit most centers can't hit free throws late, and they don't play the transition game well. So,
okay, but the newer 7-footers, let's say you put Okafor and Towns on the same team. They got some speed, and if you bang them enough through 7 games, they're going to slow down. Yeah. And to hit shots, you need your – I'm not saying it will guarantee to work, but you're definitely not going to beat them by trying to copycat them.
Well,
so why not bang them?
Yeah,
why not get stronger? I mean, that was in game 4, when the physicality started really affecting the game. You saw the Cavaliers pull the victory out,
and that was that's the only game in the finals the officials really let them play. Yes, if you remember this, you eventually have to guard a 7-footer on the perimeter, Kevin Durant. So if you don't, and there's very few guys that can. That's why average is 27 a night. Listen, the world's changed, Chris. The three-point shot is here to stay. I mean, you watched the draft last night.
Right.
I mean, you got to draft guys who can shoot. I mean, even the 7-footers, they all shoot.
Right.
So it's just, listen, you know what I do think? Thank you, Chris, for the call. You know, it is really funny. People all call these radio shows. Here's what's really funny. And it just drives me nuts. I mean, I laugh at it. All these fans are like, yeah, the Pistons and Michael Jordan's Bulls would kill these teams. Oh, so last night, why are you so excited when your team drafts a guy who can hit three-pointers? If you'd have drafted Ben Wallace with the number 1 pick last night, would you have been excited? Because he's 1994 basketball. Would you have drafted Ben Wallace number 1? Oh, that would have been idiotic. But you're the same guy who's like, oh, 1980s basketball was amazing. Yeah, and then the rules all changed. Think about all the guys you brag about. Oh, you Knick fans. I love John Starks. I love Anthony Mason. I love Charles Oakley. So you'd have been okay last night if the Knicks had 3 lottery picks and picked those 3 guys who can't shoot. Because you loved them, right? Yeah. That's the funny thing about you guys that love the 1980s and 90s NBA. Those guys couldn't shoot threes. They'd be dogs today. I mean, New York Knicks wouldn't be a playoff team in the East. They had no shooters. You've got to be able to shoot. The rules have changed. Even Alabama football. Nick Saban's like, we got to do some spread. We got to do some spread. We've got to spread this puppy out. We got to keep up with people. Here's what never works in business. Stubborn. It just doesn't work. And I'm not a businessman, but I read the Wall Street Journal. Here's what never works. I want to talk golf on sports radio because I love it. Click, ratings drop. I mean, I can remember when I used to be at ESPN. It was about halfway through my career there. And we got a research product that the management had done. And I don't even know, it was on like the email, and I read it. And what they said is millennials, they're not loyal to teams, they're loyal to stars. So I'm thinking, I don't even know if we called them millennials then. It's like 7 years ago. And so I told my staff, I'm like, guys, the world's changing. Old sports fans root for teams. Young fans, they're more a Kobe fan than a Laker fan. So when we started talking about teams from that point forward 7 years ago, I talked more about stars than teams. Because you, the audience, were changing. And I moved off baseball, regular season baseball talk about 7 years ago. Because you, the audience, changed. I'm not a business guy, but I know this. Stubborn doesn't work. If you can go ahead and play mid-range basketball, but here's who was left at the end of last year. Cleveland, Golden State. Combined 16 guys that can hit a three. By the way, San Antonio, I think, was number 1 in the league in three-point efficiency. Efficiency. So even old cranky Popovich is like, okay. So, Tennessee Titans, last year at the beginning of the year, remember everybody was saying, hey, they're old school. They're going to run the football. Yeah, it's kind of funny because they just acquired Eric Decker. It's kind of funny. Marcus Mariota throws a lot. Like, in the end, you got to throw the football. The game's changed. And so the way to beat the Warriors, cross your fingers on an injury and start like the Lakers, start building an offensive repertoire that can get close to matching them, and then maybe you get some breaks and you get a LeBron. But I don't think the answer is ever, I'm just not doing it. I don't think that's ever the answer. I've told Brett Brown, coach of the Sixers, around the corner. Welcome back. Good to have you in. The show is flying by. Taking phone calls today because I'm in Burbank. Beautiful Burbank. Have a beautiful office visit. A view of a big building. It's beige and a parking lot. Really appreciate that. I moved to the most beautiful city in America. I'm staring at concrete. I'm just nitpicking. 866-987-2570. Doug Gottlieb was money this morning. Rob Pelinka next hour, Laker GM. Chris Broussard, too. Brett Brown, Sixers head coach. Used to be in San Antonio, supposed to be joining us. I thought it was a lot of fun last night. I really did. I had a lot of fun last night. You know, it's one of those things where I feel lucky sometimes. I love football and I love the NBA. And when the football season ends, man, I do a couple of weeks of college basketball. I dive into the NBA, and I just had an absolute ball the last 3 months talking hoops, and we still have free agency. Brett Brown's the coach of the Sixers, used to be in San Antonio. And, Brett, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great, Colin. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so now it can be told, Markelle Fultz, when was the moment, Brett, the car ride home, the interview, there was an epiphany, there was a moment that you went, okay, we're taking him. What was it?
I mean, really, it was Brian and Colangelo and myself coming back from a Josh Jackson workout from Sacramento where dialogue was had between the Celtics and Brian. And, you know, it was playing out kind of slowly. Then all of a sudden, there was a verbal agreement. And I think with that verbal agreement, as an organization, we felt immediately certain that Markelle was our guy.
You know, it's funny. You don't have Cavs pressure or San Antonio pressure, but there does feel like, Brett, even though you got a bunch of kids, and I can't wait to watch you play, do you sense that, okay, we're rebuilding and we're young, but now people want to see with these young kids, they want to see some W's. Do you sense any of that?
I mean, you can't help but sense it. The thing I feel strongest is it's an educated league. I think that once we say, well, this is the team, we still haven't gone into free agency at all, I think the instant reality is our NBA backcourt has never played a second together, nor have they played a second of NBA basketball. And so, you know, you start looking at, this is my 17th year in the NBA, and you start trying to study and, you know, be ready for the growth of these guys. You remember that old Seattle team, you know, with the Ravens soon after Russell Westbrook. You look at even the middle of the Timberwolves that rolled out, you know, a few first-round draft picks and, you know, experienced a tough season last year. Those things ground me. They remind me of, you know, the patience as it relates to, like, do you feel I feel the excitement anymore. And, you know, I think all those types of things come to my mind more than sort of the weight of expectation.
Brett Brown is the coach of the Philadelphia 76ers. He's joining us in the herd. When you know, everybody's talking about Markelle Fultz, but last year Ben Simmons was part of this massive summer league fascination, the ratings, the attendance. Can we ask you, where's Ben Simmons at physically?
I'm excited to answer it. He's doing great. We've just about completed, I think, an amazing month by NBA standards where we lost our entire team in the gym for the month of June. And we've the luxury of moving into a, you know, multi-million state-of-the-art practice facility where it's a really wonderful environment for these guys to coexist and eat food and lift weights and get better. And Ben was a significant part of the month of June to the point where he was playing one-on-one and 3-on-3 and 5-on-5 and actually, you know, feeling people, playing against bodies, working on the development of his shot. Physically, he's in a very good place, and I think that the month of June reflects my ability to say that.
It's interesting. I'm watching last night, and you have a mix of international guys, domestic guys, and primarily domestic players, but the Knicks take a kid from France. And, you know, years ago, Dick Vitale said something, and, you know, Dick can have some bluster, but I thought it was a good point. He said, sometimes we pick apart our domestic players because we see them, and then we love an international player because we don't see them as much. We nitpick the people, our kids, our wife, that we see every day. And I thought, you know, it's a really interesting point. What is the difference when you first get a 20-year-old international guy and a 20-year-old domestic kid? Brett, is there a difference? Maybe the psychology, the toughness. What is the difference?
I mean, I feel comfortable first answering this. I lived overseas for 17 years, and had the privilege of coaching in 3 Olympic Games. And you're able to, and I'm the son of a coach. I grew up in the state of Maine and played for. So I'm lucky to have had the background that I have had. I feel, to answer the question better, I think that the foreign guys are used to playing with adults and used to playing against grown men. And I think sort of a maturity side that is expedited when you do grow up in those environments overseas. We produce the best basketball players in the world, the best athletes by and large. It's just a stroking type of comment in the world. But that's not me. And I say it mostly that they play against adults from a very early age in professional, almost type leagues, whereas, the United States kids are sort of AAU driven and high school driven and college driven, and they're playing against their peers. It's a completely different.
Phone's breaking up. We got about a minute left. Can you? And I know it's tough. It's not your player. How do you think Lonzo Ball's going to be? I can't wait to watch him play. What's your gut feeling on Lonzo Ball?
I think he's going to be great. I think he passes at a really level. There was a stage, Colin, I thought we were going to have him. When the information comes out, looking around, you really started to study him more. I think he's really got an incredible elite NBA skill and that he can pass.
Brett Brown, Sixers head coach. Nice night for you guys. Good luck, Coach.
Thank you, Colin.
I don't know if you could hear. I wanted to keep him because the international domestic question's an interesting one. You play with older players in Europe, and you play with younger guys here. And I think that's an issue. I do think Lonzo Ball is uniquely mature because of this. He's had to deal with his dad. He's been a star since high school. He's lived in L.A. It's different here. It's not the sticks. I think Lonzo's ready to be a Laker point guard. Now, physically, he's not a great finisher at the rim. He's not a great defender. But I can make an argument that LeVar Ball has actually toughened up Lonzo Ball. And that he's made him deal with some stuff that he wouldn't have to deal with a perfect parent. That LeVar's added a layer of chaos that Lonzo's now used to dealing with. And you start looking at Kobe's relationship with his dad and Oscar De La Hoya's with his dad. And sometimes the helicopter dad's a nightmare, and sometimes they toughen you. And you get a body armor. Now, I can make the argument with Lonzo, a very solid argument, that he's been dealing with this LeVar stuff for years. He's kind of used to dealing with some noise and chaos, and it doesn't bother him. Because some of these kids go to a big city and they are overwhelmed. That French kid goes to New York City, he could be overwhelmed. We've seen guys come into the NBA. They're just not ready for the league. I think Lonzo's uniquely built for it. He's been a star for the last 3 years. I mean, you heard the story the other day from Aaron Torres. He goes to gyms with NBA players, and he's the one young kids want an autograph from. Not Eric Bledsoe, not Devin Booker, Lonzo Ball and his dad and his brothers. That's why I'm very reluctant to criticize LeVar Ball. I don't always like what he did on our show with Christine Leahy, but there's something there. I mean, Doug Gottlieb, there's something there. I think it's very exciting. I think he passes the eyeball test. He's long, and he plays basketball the right way. There's a little Ben Simmons, and I liked him too, with Lonzo Ball. They really move the ball, pass more than dribble. That's what Westbrook drives me crazy. Dribble, 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 dribble. It's the knock on Chris Paul. Dribble, dribble, dribble. That game's over. Carmelo and Kobe Bryant, their last couple years, they're not playing the current NBA. Move, come off a screen, get open. Don't put the ball on the deck unless you're going to the basket. Step back, hit a three, get back on defense. Go, it's possessions, not rebounds. Kobe freezes that ball in the angle. Everybody moves and shifts over. Carmelo does the same. Westbrook, pound, 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 pound. You can end up with good numbers, not always very efficient, and it wears out teammates. Rob Pelinka, Lakers GM's around the corner. Chris Broussard, too. Doug Gottlieb was very good from earlier today. We'll take you back to a couple of those moments. Very excited. Hour 3, first 2 done. Phone number 866-985-987-2570, 987-2570. It's The Herd. This is The Herd. Wherever you may be and however you may be listening, live in Los Angeles, iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio. About 10 minutes, Rob Pelinka stops by. Chris Broussard, too. Fun last night. And he said, gentlemen, the answer is obvious. And he had great courage, very aggressive. And his mentor came up afterwards and he said, how the hell could you just make that decision like that? And Schwarzkopf said, listen, decisions are power, and I'm here to make them. And that's what I'm in this position for, and that's why I'm a leader. And then his mentor said, but what if you're wrong? And he said, well, if I'm wrong, we'll find out quicker. And if I'm right, I did the job very well. But the point being, he pulled the trigger. Paralysis by analysis. Sometimes make the move. Just make a decision. Paul George, Pacers, make a decision. Danny Ainge, make a decision. I know. Patience is the key. A lot of times it's not. A lot of times first matters. It's good to be first. Uber is first. Lyft is second. Uber will probably always be more well-known. First in. First is important. I mean, the Warriors first in on the 3-ball revolution. They mastered it first. Everybody last night chasing them. Like, first isn't everything, but it is a thing. And it's really interesting. We have a precedent here. The Pacers have one tradable asset. They have two, but they're not moving Miles Turner. They like him, young big guy. And Paul George, that one asset, wants to be a Laker. And he's made it very clear he not only wants to be out of Indy, he told you specifically, I want that team. If I was Kevin Pritchard and I had a star player and he was my only real asset, I mean, really, you can get big stuff for him. And he not only said, I want out, he said, I want to go to blank city. I'd trade him within 24 hours. Because we have a precedent in the NBA. When a star says, I want to leave, if you don't move him quickly, you lose leverage by the month. And I say this all the time. I've built my career, pretty good career, on just watching the mistakes of others and trying not to duplicate them. It's not like I've done anything that's been that smart. I've just mostly tried to not make up stories like Brian Williams or interview the wrong people like Megyn Kelly or not get along with anybody like Keith Olbermann. Basically, my career has just been trying to avoid a lot of landmines from really famous people in my field. If you're Kevin Pritchard, dude, look around this league. Denver, Dwight Howard. When a star says I want out, and Paul George not only said I want it out, I want to go to this one team. And he's got 1 year left on your contract, you got to get him out. I mean, you can make fun of the Chicago Bulls this morning, but at least they've got a direction. You can say the Lakers aren't very good right now. They've got a direction. Like, Kevin Pritchard to me is down to praying that Danny Ainge pulls the trigger. Well, Danny Ainge hasn't pulled a trigger in 4 years. So, or you're hoping Houston just rolls the dice and just gets a wild hair and says, we'll give you like 3 good players. That may happen. But, you know, you got 28 teams to deal with here, and you're praying for 2. And Danny Ainge has not shown an affinity for rolling the dice. I mean, if anything, he's been overly reluctant and overly patient. So, you know, sometimes you just got to make a move. Look around the league. The signs are very clear. Paul George didn't just say, I want to leave. He said specifically, I want to go to that team. You get that every day you let that sit there, you're in bigger trouble. You got to go, move. And there's stories out this morning that Boston's close. I'm going to roll the dice here and say I don't buy that story. That's a plant. Maybe by Kevin Pritchard to scare the Lakers. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But, boy, Danny Ainge wouldn't do the Porzingis, Jimmy Butler stuff. And you get multiple years in a contract. Paul George, would he really commit long-term to Boston before signing? I don't see it. Boston's the opposite of Los Angeles. Culturally, ethnically, geographically, weather, lifestyle, it's different. And I just don't see him. If LA's what he wants, Boston's the opposite of that. I know they have a better team right now, but they're still not beating Cleveland. As far as the Lakers, Rob Pelinka coming on in a bit. Doug Gottlieb on earlier today. He and I have kind of been LeVar Ball supporters, though a promoter, though a little too much Don King. Gottlieb gives some credit to his dad, LeVar.
If not for LeVar, I don't think they take Lonzo Ball last night. So as much as LeVar can be obnoxious, the fact is that LeVar became kind of a thing. And Lonzo's not really interesting on his own as a person. As a player he is. LeVar helped create this image and this following that allowed Lonzo to become the guy that the Lakers had to have.
And I think Doug's right here. Lonzo's dad helped create the star. On his own, Lonzo's just talented. But his dad went Kardashian. And I've been saying this for weeks. I never felt, despite what you read, I always felt there was a little bit of pressure on Magic and Pelinka because he was going to be so good for business. And as long as he worked out for you and wasn't awful, if he was 90% of Fultz or 90%, and by the way, Lonzo's never going to be a great workout guy. You know, he doesn't have the athletic ability of De'Aaron Fox. He's not Dennis Smith. He's not. He's not Josh Jackson. You know, it's like Magic Johnson. I bet his workout wouldn't be as good as Michael Jordan or Dominique Wilkins. I mean, you'd walk out of a Dominique Wilkins workout, he had like a 48-inch vertical. You'd be driving home like, oh, my God. I mean, Magic had to play with others before you went, wow. Like that. I mean, you knew he was good. You had his tape. You watched him in college. Gottlieb also on why the Lakers chose Lonzo Ball last night.
De'Aaron Fox outplayed him. I know he only scored 4 points against him in the NCAA tournament, but he outplayed him. De'Aaron Fox is a better athlete, a better defender, and has a kind of bigger, brighter personality at this point. But I think Lonzo was the guy that the Lakers at some point talked themselves into. You know what? We got to do it because it's L.A., he's L.A., this all just works.
Rob Pelinka around the corner. All right, Rob Pelinka, Lakers GM, supposed to be calling in. It was fun last night. College basketball generally doesn't, create stars. You know, you see a Reggie Bush come out of college football or a Tim Tebow or a Johnny Manziel, and they feel like stars. Last college basketball player that came out of college basketball, and I felt like, I got to watch him play, wasn't Anthony Davis. It was Blake Griffin. Lonzo and Ben Simmons last year for different reasons. You know, there's an enigma quality. There's a mystery. I can't wait to watch Lonzo play. Not just because I live in Los Angeles, but I think Lonzo is commerce. I think he's basketball. I would have picked him number one. It's funny. This is nothing against Markelle Fultz, but I would have picked Lonzo number one. I think a really interesting player is Jason Tatum. And because there was so much attention to all these guards, if I just said to you, there's a really smart kid that's 6'9.5", can put the ball on the deck and shoot threes, that's Jason Tatum. I mean, I when Boston picked him third, I was like, that's a good pick. I think he'll be a better pro than Markelle Fultz, and I think Fultz will be fine. But I mean, Lonzo just stole so much of the glare of this draft. But Doug Gottlieb and I agree on this. I'd have taken him number one. I like him a lot. Long, and Rob Pelinka is the Lakers GM, and of course, for years and years, the agent for Kobe Bryant, member of the Fab Five in Michigan. First of all, Rob, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, I'm excited to talk with you, Colin, and the fans too.
This is your first time being a GM. What was it like to be in the room?
You know, it was amazing. It was kind of like speed chess because everything's happening so fast and in real time. You got, 4 war room lines with calls coming in, and you got your own cell phone buzzing. So it's just trying to manage, all the different iterations of trades and combinations that you can do. But the great thing is we have a really strong front office team, and a lot of the preparation that went into the night was kind of predicting what hypotheticals might come our way and having answers to the questions before they even came. So it worked out really well.
Rob Pelinka, Laker GM, people trying to beep in, I imagine. He's got a lot of requests today. Lonzo Ball, and I said this about Magic Johnson, when you do these individual workouts, Lonzo and Magic are not built for individual workouts. Penny Hardaway, Michael Jordan, there's certain guys that jump out of the gym. Was there a moment watching Lonzo's personal workouts where you have to reconcile, okay, we know we like him, but he's not a 42-inch vertical. He's not a tomahawk jam guy. Were the workouts unique?
I'm a person of metaphor sometimes, and I said to Magic after Lonzo came in for his workout, I said, watching Lonzo Ball in a 1-on-0 workout would be like, looking at Van Gogh paintings where all he could use is a pencil. And I kind of mean that. Like, his artistry and his gift is clearly, he has this transcendent gift to see the floor and pass and put the ball on a dime, like, Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady and quarterbacks like that just come to mind where you can just see a gift that they do things that other players can't do. And, we just feel like a talent like that is just something that maybe you see every 10 years in the draft. And that's why we were so attracted to him becoming a part of the Lakers and really helping us transform the way we play.
Could I make the argument, Rob, that because he's been dealing with his dad's noise and he's been a star since a junior in high school, that Lonzo's actually uniquely qualified for the fishbowl that is the Lakers, and that the magnitude of the job is that, a lot of kids get overwhelmed. They're 19. This kid walks into a gym 2 years ago, and he's got 2 million Instagram followers, that in a weird way, LeVar's uniquely prepared him for this gig.
No question. I think it's a good point. One of the things that really brought us to clarity on making this decision is a few days ago, we spent some time in Chino Hills. Magic and I traveled out there, and we kind of watched the day of, we wanted to say, what is this family about? And, it started at 8 a.m. with some literally like, hill runs. And LeVar had about 20 neighborhood kids there. And what was incredible to Magic and I is he knew every kid's name. He knew every kid's characteristics, how to coach him, how to drive him. And he really treated Lonzo and his two brothers the same as every 21 of those kids in terms from the hill runs into the family garage where they've transformed it into a weight room and everybody's working out, and then there's a breakfast where LeVar is cooking and doing the dishes. And so you get a sense that there's like a genuine commitment to sort of family and hard work and, the way they care for their mom, Tina, who's had some, medical things come up. It was just a day where you left it and you're like, wow, this is a really impressive family. And I think Lonzo Ball's got those characteristics instilled in him.
Rob Pelinka, Laker GM. So you pick Kyle Kuzma and Josh Hart. Now, I could make an argument that Jordan Bell, though limited offensively, is a better athlete, but Kuzma and Hart were older players. Josh Hart, 4 years at Nova leading the team. Kuzma, a couple years at Utah. So when the draft was done, my takeaway was you guys were doing more than just eyeing talent. You were doing some cultural changes here. That was my interpretation. Your thoughts about Josh Hart, who's not the athlete of a Jordan Bell. He's not. But was there more than just getting talent last night?
Yeah, no question. I mean, the word that we kind of are hanging everything on right now in the Lakers locker room is mentality. We want guys that have a certain mentality about them. And Josh Hart is, he had our number one interview in the Chicago Combine just because his mental approach to the game is so advanced. He's thinking about, eating clean. He's thinking about, how he trains in the weight room. He's watching film. I think Jay Wright really helps create the mindset of a champion. And we felt like as a mature young player, he would be on our young core just for the way he prepares. And then Kyle Kuzman, talked a lot with his coach at Utah, his Coach K. And just the versatility he brings. He's kind of one of these positionless players that, at 6'9", can put the ball in the court in the open court, put the ball on the floor, make passes, make the corner three, and then use his length to defend. So we feel like if we can have versatile players on the perimeter with Brandon Ingram and guys like that, that's really the directionality we want to go in terms of how Luke Walton wants to coach this core.
It's a weird situation. I'm hearing all sorts of rumors last night. And years ago, Mel Kiper, who's a football draft guy, said, I get used all the time. Half this stuff I know is not true. And we know there's a player out there, a star, a Paul George, that wants to be a Laker. We know that. And I'm reading all these stories last night online, and I'm thinking, I don't know if I buy any of these things. Is that sometimes there's a lot of game playing from front offices trying to send out messages. I mean, you're a former agent. You know how the game works. When you read things and you go to maybe a Woj or you hear things, how much do you believe when you hear all these media reports about trade? I heard 25 trades last night and there was one.
It's interesting. There's on draft night, you literally get hundreds of trades flashed at you. And to use another metaphor, it's almost like mining for gold, right? So you pull out your pan, you put it in the water, and there's 100 rocks, and you're shaking looking for that one nugget. So like you said, there's maybe 97, 98 throwaways, but then there's two that works. And like, for instance, last night, we knew that we wanted Hart at 28, and then all of a sudden, we had an opportunity knowing we could get him at 30, and that the Jazz wanted a certain player at 28 that they thought would be gone at 29, where we were able to pick up the 42nd pick. So that was an example of just an iteration of a trade that makes sense, because then at 42, we selected a stretch 5 that's a 19-year-old, 6'11" player that can make threes, and he's got a 7'6" wingspan, Thomas Bryant, who can protect the rim. And so we were able to kind of flip 28 into two young players to develop that fit our culture and fit our style of play.
What's Magic like as a boss?
Listen, he's unbelievable. And I don't say that just to, kind of blow smoke. He is an incredibly positive person. Like, the huge electric smile that you see he brings into the office every day. Everything's positive. He is just a genius of a vision caster. The way he motivates people and works within the context of teams of people is very much like he played on the basketball court. And I think all of us just feel like it's a privilege to show up to that spirit every day. And I think it's really trickling down into our entire culture. And I think it's why players around the league kind of see the Lakers platform again as a really attractive destination.
It's funny, and I mean this respectfully, have you ever said, Magic, you're wrong? I know you're a first-time GM, but Magic, I like this kid over that kid. Did you sell Magic? Like, how's the process? Scouts come to you, you go to Magic. Were there ever disagreements last night in that room, or did you figure it out?
There has to be disagreements. It was interesting. When I represented Kobe as his agent for 18 years, one of the things we would do in the process is if there was a big decision to be made, he'd say, let's play this out. He'd say, Rob, I want you to give me every reason why I shouldn't do this. And then he would think through every single decision critically, the pros and cons, and then we'd make a choice. And I think that's a really healthy process, and I think Magic and I have the same type of interaction where something will come up and we'll debate all sides of it. And then get to a place. But so far, there's been, unbelievable harmony in all the big decisions where we've netted out after talking it the same way. So we feel really grateful for that. And I think we're very like-minded, and that's made our relationship really special.
Finally, Rob Pelinka, because you have a relationship with Magic, a superstar, and they see the world sometimes differently, do you need a Kobe's advice with players, or does Magic provide that because he has the same set of eyes and sensibility that Kobe does?
Listen, always open for Kobe's advice because Magic and Kobe are two of the true basketball geniuses in the world, right? They're the .001 percenters. So anytime you can get advice or information from a true genius, of course you're going to take that into account. And just to have both of them as influences in my life, as, you know, friends in my life. I mean, every day I kind of wake up and I pinch myself and I think, how is this happening to me? Like, how am I in this position? But I just try to live with gratitude and appreciation every day for it, and it's really been a blessing.
Rob, I'm happy for you. You did a really good job last night. Thorough, did your homework, and I think you got a star at guard. I wish you the very best.
Hey, it was great to be on. Really appreciate your work. We listen to you all the time. We think you're one of the best, and thanks for having me on.
You bet, Rob Pelinka. I think the Lakers did really well last night. I really do. And I'm not just blowing smoke. I've been very critical last couple of years. I thought they did well last night. And I'll say it again. It's not just getting players. Like, what is your direction? I feel like they have a direction. And that's, like, big for me. And maybe to a fault. You know, that's been kind of my issue with the Clippers. It's like, okay, I like Chris Paul, but what's your direction? You have a center that doesn't get along with a point guard and a wing that can't shoot. Like, what are you doing? And maybe it's just because my mind, I'm not sophisticated enough to layer things in a bunch of different offshoots. Like, I just want things to be simply stated and simply spotted. And, like, I wake up this morning and I'm like, oh, I get what the Lakers are doing. Like, you ever watch a football game? I've always felt this. When I watch a football game, a well-coached team, this goes counter to what you'd think's the truth. I can tell when I watch a really good football team within 2 series, oh, that's what they're trying to do. Now, you think to yourself, Colin, it shouldn't be that easy to spot. But remember, you're dealing with young men in a regulated, violent sport. I'll watch Alabama, and I'm like, oh, Alabama doesn't respect their corners. I can spot it first series. Oh, Alabama thinks they're weak on their guard center, guard interior line play. Every time I watch Alabama, I can tell within minutes, oh, Alabama thinks that's their weakness. I watch New England, and they'll attack. Bill Belichick will attack and attack the same thing for 3 hours. Like when I watched the Lakers this morning, I'm like, oh, I get it. Lonzo and length that can shoot. Brook Lopez can shoot. Brandon Ingram can shoot. The Utah kid can shoot. That's why I tell you, Julius Randle's not long for this team. Julius Randle's not long. Minnesota now. Youth. What they really want, what they did last night with Jimmy Butler, what they're telling you is they like Andrew Wiggins. He's not going to be their star. He'll be their second or third best player. They want Jimmy and Karl Anthony Towns. They felt, okay, we're 3 years into Wiggins. Like, we really, really, really like him. Probably doesn't have the dog alpha to be the one. He's not Kobe, but we like him. So let's go out and get a guy with a little bit of a tude who plays real defense, who's got some years on him, and wants to prove he's a star, Jimmy Butler. Like, I see what they're doing. And who, by the way, plays real defense. That's why they hired Tibbs. So give me a direction. Lakers this morning, I feel like, oh, okay, I get the direction. And maybe that's not the way you should see the world, but that's the way to me. If you can spot it and go, okay, that's what it is, that's a good thing. It's just like a business. I mean, it's just the same thing. My wife does this all the time. She'll walk into a restaurant and she'll say, it's not going to work 6 weeks. And I'm like, why? She's like, well, okay, first of all, nobody greets me at the door. I look at this menu. It's a million things, not 2. What do they do well? Like, she used to work in the hospitality business for 20 years. Her parents did. She can spot immediately. Okay, simple, clean, efficient, out the door. It's always the same 3. And I've known her now for 11 years. She'll just call it. Won't work. Will. This works. This doesn't. It's the same with sports. It's not that hard to see success. It's right out in front of you. John Goulet, a noted veteran newsman with news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
So, obviously the Jimmy Butler to the Celtics thing had been rumored for quite a while, and we found out last night that at a price he was available. He was traded to the Timberwolves. Here was Danny Ainge being asked about what the Timberwolves gave up for Jimmy Butler.
Were you surprised by what Minnesota had to give up for Butler? Were you ever close on that one, Danny?
No, not really. In reality, we were never, ever close to trading the number 3 pick. Of course, there were conversations existed, but we never came close to doing that. But I think that Minnesota gave up a lot. Jimmy Butler's a good player, and all 3 of those guys. Zach LaVine has a very bright future, and I think Chris Dunn is a terrific talent. I think it's a fair and good trade for both.
Considering the price tag, I mean, don't you think that they could have easily made that deal?
Yes.
I mean, the Timberwolves gave up the 7th pick, but then they also got back the 16th pick. So they really gave, I mean, it was trading down 9 spots and you got Jimmy Butler.
Is it possible we're just giving Danny Ainge too much credit?
He's very attached to these picks. He has a higher value on them than other GMs do.
Okay, so he's been there now 4 or 5 years. Ask yourself, who's the best player right now for the Celtics? Isaiah Thomas, they didn't draft him.
Right.
Al Horford's 2, they didn't draft him.
Yep.
Jay Crowder didn't draft him. And Avery Bradley took 4 years to develop. I mean, at some point, his best is Marcus Smart's Kelly Olynyk as second best drafted player. I'm not thinking this is a really strong draft. But Boston, I don't know. I just think at some point it's paralysis here. Just make a move.
His biggest move, like the best thing he did besides trading Garnett and everything, was he collected assets and traded them for stars. That's how he became a good GM and won a title. So Pacers president Kevin Pritchard spoke about Paul George wanting out of Indiana. His comments were pretty strong. Take a listen.
I mean, it was a gut punch. I mean, it was a total gut punch. Because we've had many conversations over the summer about players that we'd like to add. And so when that came in that he wanted to look at another place, it was a gut punch for us. It couldn't have come at a worse time for me. If we would have known this a little longer ago or a few months ago, I think we could have been a little bit more prepared. And then the way it got out was a little struggling to us.
I understand him being a little upset, especially about the Lakers part. But knowing that he wants to leave, isn't that a good thing? I mean, they had to have known this was a possibility. We've all known it was a possibility for a while. How does he not know? I feel like he's trying to gain sympathy. I don't feel bad for him.
I got to tell you, I think Daryl Morey is smart and / crazy enough to give him 2 good players for Paul George, roll the dice, because Daryl just got a 4-year extension, so nobody's going to fire him. But for a GM, you'd have to have, like Daryl Morey's got a 4-year extension. He's Belichickian. He's not going to get fired. Most general managers are one really horrific move from getting canned in this league, and he is down to praying that Daryl Morey or Danny Ainge, or he may get nothing. He may get Julius Randle. I mean, I got news for you. Once the season starts, the Lakers have 1,000% of the leverage. I'm not sure they don't have 1,000% of it today.
And finally, Tom Thibodeau spoke about acquiring Jimmy Butler and what he brings to the Timberwolves.
Learning how to close out games, some of that is trial and error. You have to go through it, and that's where Jimmy's been outstanding. And he had to go through the same thing. Jimmy started off, he wasn't that player in his first couple of years, and he became that player because of the way he worked and all the things he's added to his game since coming into the league. And that's something that I think he can help our players with.
That was Tom Thibodeau on Dan Patrick this morning. Minnesota lost 19 games last year in which they had the lead in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
That was tied for second most in the NBA. Isn't he perfect? They need defensive help and veteran help. Doesn't he bring both of those?
Good plus minus. And, listen, as good as Kawhi Leonard is, it took him 4 years. Couldn't score first 2 years in the league. And he went to college for 2 years. So, yeah, I mean, I think that was the easiest thing of the night. Jalen Rose kept saying it. It's like the winner of the draft. No, only one team got a guaranteed star last night. One team. That was Minnesota. Goulet with the news.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Lie News.
Chris Broussard's up next. With True Car, find what other people in your area paid for the same car you want. $3,000 off MSRP. Doesn't matter if it's new or it's used. Just a more confident car buying experience. Chris Broussard's our buddy, NBA analyst. Our guy, FS1, also has got a show on Fox Sports Radio on the weekend. So you wake up this morning and you're like, boy, Minnesota, they really stole that thing from Chicago. That was my interpretation. Is there any bright news for the Bulls this morning?
Well,
Not really, in my opinion. I think the Bulls have been confused for the past several years, and what happened yesterday was just another sign of that. Remember, a couple years ago when they let Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah go, right, as free agency trade to the Knicks, they were going to go young. A couple weeks later, they signed Rajon Rondo and then Dwayne Wade, which doesn't match, obviously, going young. Then they want to say we had a nice playoff run. We've still got Rondo in the fold. They were hoping Wade would opt out. He didn't. Now you got him and Butler. So now you trade Butler, who you were planning on building around. You still got two older players who want to win now, and now you've got this group of young guys. So it's a mess in Chicago right now. There was talk about the dysfunction in Cleveland deterring Jimmy Butler. There's a lot more dysfunction in Chicago, believe me. So, I like Zach LaVine, but at best he turns into Jimmy Butler, right? I don't think he's that good.
Neither do I. I think he's fun. He's fun. I don't trust him to be a franchise guy.
No. And that's the thing. They did not get anybody that's going to be a franchise player. Chris Dunn is probably a good backup at best, maybe a mediocre starter. Zach LaVine's a good player, not a franchise player. And Markkanen, he's okay. I don't think he's going to be Kristaps Porzingis or anything like that. So, look, they're like I said, I think they're a mess.
I am hearing stories. Sometimes I don't know if I believe the story. It's just a plant. I think Kevin Pritchard's in trouble. I really do.
His job?
Well, here's the problem. He is now down to praying that Danny Ainge, Mr. I don't want to make a trade, makes a trade. Or Houston, Daryl Morey, you got a 4-year extension, so he could roll the dice. He's down to about 2 teams that are going to be willing to sign Paul George, because I don't buy that. There's a story out this morning, Paul George is getting very close to giving a commitment long-term to the Celtics. I just don't buy that. Are they trapped? Is Indy getting trapped?
If he was ready to give a commitment to the Celtics, that deal would be done. Right? It would be done. So I think the 2 teams you mentioned certainly would pull the trigger on that type of deal. The Clippers would, but Blake Griffin would have to be a part of that, and I don't see that happening. And then, of course, the Cavs. And this is the Cavs' hope all along, that no one else is going to give up anything of value for George. And they will be forced to take Kevin Love or a 3-way deal where they get maybe a couple young players instead of Love. Look, Indiana does not want Love. But Love, at the very least, could be an asset.
Right.
And so it's better than nothing. Remember Cleveland, when LeBron left and went to Miami. They obviously didn't want to do a sign and trade. But at the end of the day, they did it because you got to get something. And so that's Cleveland's hope, and that's why they still are thinking that they could get it done.
What did you make of the Lakers last night? It looked like there was a definite direction. They got good kids willing to play defense. Kuzma, Josh Hart. They got guys who can shoot. At least they have a direction. I thought it was a pretty good effort.
No, I did too. Like I said, I've been impressed with what Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka have done so far. Obviously, they took Lonzo Ball, which we all expected. And what do you want to put around him? The stories are he's a weak defender. So you want to get guys that can guard. Look at Steph Curry's a weak defender. You have guys around him that can guard, and we know Luke Walton wants to follow the models of Golden State. Also with Lonzo Ball, what do you want? Shooters. So I think they're building smartly. I don't expect them to be able to get Paul George for, their young players and things like that. But they're building smartly, and I think so far so good with the new regime.
I'm watching that draft last night, and it feels like the world is chasing the Warriors.
Oh, yeah. No, look, I was talking to a GM yesterday. The teams are kind of falling into two realms. There are that handful of teams that think they can chase Golden State and try to upend them. And then there's the group that's essentially saying we're rebuilding and preparing for the future. And that's where Indiana now wants to be, and that's why they're not interested in Kevin Love. But you're right. I'm happy that everyone hasn't thrown in the towel. I'm happy to hear that Daryl Morey is going to try to make a run at Blake Griffin, Chris Paul, Paul George, guys like that. I'm happy that Boston is going to go all in and try to get whether it's George or Hayward or somebody like that. And obviously Cleveland's going to build. So, I'm glad to see these teams aren't completely throwing in the towel, because here's the thing. You don't know what can happen. We can say, would LeBron want to keep going to the finals in the East and losing to Golden State? Of course not. But you don't know what type of injuries, what type of movements could be made. No one knew 2 years ago Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love weren't going to be available for the finals. So things happen, and so that's why you try to get there and you don't just succumb to what looks like a superior team.
By the way, another Eastern star, Jimmy Butler, went west. If Paul George goes west, I think that rec team you're on could compete in the East. Holy God, Chris, it's incredible. It's incredible. We're down to the Greek freak, LeBron and Kyrie in the East as real stars.
John Wall, I know United's the highest on him, but you're right. Look, top-tier players, there's really only LeBron. I mean, I don't want to count it off the top of my head, but how many of the top 10 players are in the West now? Probably 8.
Yes. And of the top 20, I counted this morning, it's 16 of the top 20.
Yeah. Here's the interesting thing for Jimmy Butler. He did not want to be traded, not because he's so in love with Chicago, but because he wanted an opportunity to get that Supermax. Now that's gone. And think about the West, and I like Jimmy Butler, but it's going to be tough for him to even be an all-star in the West.
Oh, I know.
So the people in Cleveland are saying, yeah, you should have just pushed your way here. Now, granted, Chicago could have done whatever they wanted. They still could have moved into Minnesota, but Cleveland's like, no, see, you should have came here. You shouldn't have been worrying about your Supermax, because things would have worked out. You would have been in the finals here. Now, look, I like him in Minnesota, but, let's see how things turn out. If I'm the T-Wolves, this is my priority for free agency. Kyle Lowry.
That's
who I'm going after.
Yep.
I like him there. Tibbs would love him. He's a defender. I know Toronto feels like they're going to be able to bring him back. And look, you mentioned it. Does Kyle Lowry, is he better off staying in the East or going to the West? Probably in Toronto, right? He'll keep making the All-Star team.
Yeah, I'd go west. I want to be on a team that's playing in June. I'm sorry.
But do you think, obviously Toronto's got a ceiling in the East. How soon do you think Minnesota can really compete?
I don't know.
Not to make the playoffs, but to, actually compete with Golden State. I think they're still 3 years away from that.
I'll go 2. If I get Lowry, Butler, Wiggins, Karl Anthony, Shabazz Muhammad, I think just
Georgie Dang.
That's pretty good. That's pretty
got a good coach. It'd be interesting.
Okay, 15 seconds. Gordon Hayward has a week. Will he be a Celtic or remain in Utah?
I'm going to say a Celtic. Some people around the league telling me it's a done deal to Boston. Others are saying Utah is extremely confident. So we'll see.
Have a good weekend, buddy.
All right, my man.
Good show. True Car. Find out what other people in your area paid for the same car you're looking for. New or used, doesn't matter. Save $3,000 off MSRP. True Car. Broussard, Rob Pelinka, Brett Brown, Doug Gottlieb. Brought it on a Friday. Loved it. Yeah, I mean, if Gordon Hayward's got a week to decide. If he is going to Boston, Isaiah Thomas, Avery Bradley, Gordon Hayward, Jason Tatum, Al Horford, Kelly Olynyk, still not beating Cleveland. But let's see what happens to Cleveland. I just don't buy the Paul George Boston stuff. Some local meatball reported that this morning. Woj doesn't have it. Mark Stein doesn't have it. Broussard doesn't have it. Windhorst doesn't have it. I don't buy it. I don't buy sausage fingers and mud flap in the morning breaking that story. See you Monday. Have a good weekend. Be safe in L.A. It's The Herd.